This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 252 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is ethical wildlife tourism, and in particular I've got a punny subtitle, Elephants Are Many Shades of Grey. It'll make more sense as you listen. So you might know, especially if you've been following in the Facebook group or on LinkedIn, that I've actually been a student recently. I've been taking the RISE Travel Institute's pilot program, which is going to lead me, fingers crossed, to a certificate in sustainability and anti-oppression in travel. It's been fabulous, such an interesting course. Anyway, one of the certificate's requirements is to complete a capstone project, and luckily you're allowed to do it like this as a podcast. So pretty cool, hey. This is my task, and it is to research a problem in the travel and tourism industry, identify the systemic causes of it, and to find or suggest some sustainable and equitable solutions to that problem using ideas from the program. So that's what this podcast episode is all about. Now, I actually picked kind of the broad topic of ethical wildlife tourism, which was one of the sessions of the program, and I mostly picked it because the content in that one was particularly fascinating, and it reminded me really strongly that many issues in thoughtful travel aren't black and white, but instead many shades of grey. And I'm going to focus on elephants in wildlife tourism in particular because they're grey? No, because I think it's just a great case study to see how our thoughts have changed over the years, and in particular how my thoughts had become quite black and white about it, like don't ride elephants full stop, and that was the end of the advice I would give. But then having been given the chance to do a deeper dive into this topic, it's just all a bit more nuanced than that. I'm still sure we shouldn't ride elephants, but anyway, we'll get to that. And so hopefully I can continue to help travellers make more informed decisions about the animal experiences they choose on their travels. I'm going to focus mostly on the situation in Thailand because it's particularly acute there, I suppose. But a lot of what we're going to talk about really applies throughout the world, and it can definitely be kind of extrapolated beyond just elephants to many kinds of wildlife encounters, and even some just really general principles of thoughtful travel. So that's what this episode is about. Now, parts of it are a bit, heavy going in the fact, in the sense of, we've done some awful things. So in contrast to that, I want to start off with just a delightful elephant encounter story from Zambia. It's a story I recorded last year from Catherine Marshall, and it's just such a lovely elephant story, and I thought it was just the right way to open this episode about elephants.
Well, there's a camp in Zambia in southern Africa called Mfui Lodge, and it's in a national park called South Luangwa National Park, and there are lots of elephants in this park, lots of different herds of elephants. But when the lodge was built, the owners didn't realize that they had built it in between a river where a lot of elephants gather to drink and a wild mango tree. And every year in November, this mango tree fruits. So the fruit ripens, and the elephants who've gathered to drink on the river have an incredible sense of smell, of course, and they immediately smell these mangoes, and elephants really love mangoes. And in fact, in this particular park, there are a lot of communities living on the edge of the park. And the elephants go and they raid the villagers' mango trees.
Oh, no.
So the villagers don't like them so much. So it's actually preferable for them to eat the wild mangoes inside the park. And they're a real treat for them. So instead of going around the lodge, the elephants do what is quite instinctive for them. They follow their natural path from the river to the mango tree, and it just so happens to take them right through this lodge, this safari lodge. Luckily, the reception area is open plan, so it's open on either side. It's not closed up. There aren't any doors.
Right.
But the elephants do have to climb up some steps, and they walk straight through past the reception desk and down the other side, and they stand just outside the lodge eating the mangoes and feasting on these mangoes. And so I was there recently, and you're not guaranteed a sighting of the elephants, but most days they'll come through, but you might be off on a game drive. Anyway, I was lucky enough to see an elephant come through, and I stood behind the reception desk. And this elephant, and elephants are quite dangerous. You've got to be careful with them.
Yeah.
And this elephant came past, and he stuck his trunk over the reception desk. It was as if he was looking for a pen or something to sign the guest book. And then he walked over to me, and he put his trunk over towards me as if he was sniffing me to see if I had any mangoes on me. And then he carried on, and off he went. And he then stood outside feasting on these mangoes.
Catherine told me that there were some videos of these elephants on YouTube trundling through the lobby of this lodge, and so I'm going to leave one of those in the show notes. So go over to the show notes, which will be at notaballerina.com/252. There's going to be a lot more in the show notes than normal this episode, and have a look yourself. Utterly adorable. So this kind of elephant encounter seems perfectly okay to me, I think. I mean, maybe in a really perfect world, perhaps it would have been better if the lodge hadn't been built where the elephants walk through, but, perhaps it's really difficult to have thought about all of that in advance. Certainly seems the elephants aren't suffering. At least they didn't chop down the mango trees for the elephants, and the level of interaction with humans is, really low level and seems relatively safe. So, but let me get more concretely on to the first part of my task. So after this kind of just nice elephant overview. So the task is to describe a problem in the tourism industry and identify the systemic causes of the problem. So let's start back at animals in general. We humans really love to see or interact with animals when we travel. Have a think about the kinds of animals you've enjoyed seeing on your travels. So a couple of stats. World Animal Protection says that of the $1 trillion tourism industry globally, a quarter of it is driven by demand for wildlife tourism. And further, if you are taking a tour somewhere on your travels, there's some estimates that say 60% of tour excursions around the world involve animals in some way. So that's a lot. Now, much of this is because we just really love animals. They're amazing. We're drawn to them from, when we're tiny kids. It's just natural to want to engage with them somehow. But I think that, since we do love animals, we should want to find ways to interact or engage or see them without doing harm, and certainly without threatening the survival of a species. And at the same time, and here's where some of that grey comes in, also without increasing human suffering either. And that's why we need to look at it all from a whole systems perspective. Now, there's a researcher I came across, Joan Bentruper-Boymer, and a few years back in 2005, she listed kind of 4 ways that people view wildlife tourism. So have a listen to these and see which ones match your approach to wildlife tourism. So there's the dominionistic view, where we think animals are kind of under the dominion of human beings, where we dominate and control animals. The utilitarian view, and that's when we feel animals, we value them as being useful for us to provide some kind of social, economic or psychological benefit. Thirdly, there's the moralistic view, where we regard the welfare and rights of animals as living creatures are equally important as the needs and desires of tourists. And lastly, the protectionistic view, where we think about the use of wildlife tourism to promote species conservation and preservation. And I think that lots of thoughtful travellers will be thinking about animals in that moralistic one and the protectionistic one. And certainly that's where I lie. And you might remember my recent conversation with James Moenda about the northern white rhinos and poaching and stuff in Kenya, and that whole protectionistic view, I think, is, a really important way to see not only how can we not harm animals, but how can we do good and, try and preserve species for the future. So anyway, I thought this was a useful framework for thinking about how we view animals, and also like to think about ahead of travelling what kinds of interaction or contact we think we should have with animals and where that kind of fits. So the problem I'm narrowing down on is not just seeing elephants in general, but riding elephants. So one specific kind of tourism activity. Now, it's funny, I can remember very clearly the first time I started to realise that riding elephants was a bad idea. It was, I even tracked it back on Facebook. It was back in 2004. I was heading off to Bali on a blogging trip, and I think I'd asked for tips. And one of my former students, a lovely French girl named Fanny, who had been one of my English classes here in Perth, she just wrote on that post, "Amanda, please don't do any activity involving animals." And certainly in Bali, there's a few places where there's, perhaps some unethical wildlife tourism going on. Now, I remember, funnily enough, being quite surprised at how forceful she sounded, even though now, like 7 years later, this kind of phrasing sounds really soft. But that's how social media has developed. Weird, hey? I'd seen some stories about wildlife issues in Bali, but hadn't really thought much about it until Fanny left that message, and I'd certainly dug a lot deeper. I also, around that time, had a blogging friend, Diane, who spent a couple of years working at Elephant Nature Park, which is a really well-known sanctuary in Thailand. And her blog post, which detailed exactly why it's horrific to ride elephants, or basically to perpetuate any non-natural activity with elephants, like getting them to paint or bathing them and so on, it really cemented my views. So that talks about, the way the spirit of the elephants are broken so that they'll do what humans want, putting them through the crush, which is, basically a form of torture. I won't go into it in detail, but I will link to Diana's post in the show notes so that you can see. It's called "The Truth About Riding Elephants in Thailand," and that will, there's lots of really useful information there. Now, just to kind of reinforce that point, I just want to play a quick extract from an interview I did last year with Ben Pearson from World Animal Protection. Now, I actually had asked him to record something for my kids' travel podcast, Taking Off, which is launching very soon. But the message, the way he described it, is just so clear, and I thought it's a great way to simply describe why we shouldn't ride elephants.
So what I'd tell the kids is this: kids, elephants are absolutely beautiful animals. They really are. But they are also dangerous in that they're absolutely massive and they protect their young, and they don't generally enjoy being in close contact with human beings. And in a wild situation, it wouldn't be safe to approach an elephant, and it certainly wouldn't be safe to get on its back. They just wouldn't let you do that. The only reason that you can get on its back is because those elephants from a very young age are separated from their mummies, and they're put through a really cruel training process, which means that they're very unhappy, their spirit is broken, and they only allow you to ride on their back because of that training process they've gone through. So it's not okay to separate any animal from its mother at a young age, and it's not okay to put an animal through a cruel training process just so it can do something like let you ride around on its back. There are plenty of ways in which you can experience elephants, which are absolutely fantastic, and my kids love them too, without engaging in elephant riding and without doing things that contribute to them being treated cruelly.
So that's really the black and white version. But obviously when we start looking at the kind of systemic issues, it gets a lot more grey. So let's go back a little bit to figure out how riding elephants became such an important tourist attraction in Thailand and a real major draw card. Tourism became in the few decades ago, really, really important to Thailand. It's 20% of the GDP, and some research from 2016, perhaps carried out a little bit before that, but published in 2016, showed that 40% of tourists in Thailand had ridden or planned to ride an elephant while they were there. 40%. That's like a real lot. But how did they get there? So elephants were used in the logging industry for many, many years. The reason being they were particularly good at it, unfortunately, poor elephants. In the teak forests where the rainy seasons made it really difficult for other methods of removing logs to be effective, elephants were just good at it, and so they were used a lot. But back in 1989, there was a ban placed on logging using elephants, which was good. But the problem is, of course, that many elephants became unemployed, quote unquote. Most of the elephants, several thousand of them, were privately owned, so either by a mahout or by an owner who hired a mahout to look after them. And elephants are expensive to look after, so apparently they eat 120 to 200 kilograms of food a day, which is considerably more even than my preteen kid. And so the cost of keeping an elephant back then was about $80 a day, which is a huge amount, and obviously out of the budget of most of the mahouts. So, but to keep them alive and to look after them, and when they weren't logging, then suddenly this was a huge problem. So when that logging ban began, there was a small number of elephants released into the wild, but apparently really the available area of national parks in Thailand just isn't large enough to sustain them all. There were some cases where there was kind of retraining done so that elephants could live in the wild successfully again, but apparently that costs about $30,000 per elephant to do it properly, though that's a lot, isn't it? There were also some street-wandering elephants with their mahouts. That became a big problem, and then they were banned from urban areas. And sadly, apparently, some elephants were just simply abandoned. From a study from Kui and Chu in 2014, they estimated about 2,500 to 3,200 wild elephants and 3,000 to 4,000 captive elephants. Apparently, though, in the 1950s, there were over 13,000 captive elephants in Thailand working. So it's crazy. Now, in the 1990s, when tourism was a huge focus of the Thai government, continues to this day, but they were using elephants in tourism then because they had all these excess elephants when the logging ban came into place. So there was an organisation, a government-run one called the Thai Elephant Conservation Centre, TECC, and because I guess they needed to also create some income, they began to offer things like riding elephants, bathing and elephant shows, elephants being trained to paint or play musical instruments and so on. And at the time, a lot of the perception was that tourism had saved elephants and their mahouts, because otherwise how were they going to be looked after? So, I can see how this happens. It's, this is in the 1990s, it's a couple of decades back, and, we thought differently. So, while the elephants weren't dragging these heavy logs around all day, they probably still weren't having, their best lives, and there was a lot of talk from conservation areas and so on. Some research, or a researcher, Konta Georgopoulos, cited that Thailand has failed to conserve elephants based on their intrinsic worth as living creatures, and their future depends on demonstrating their economic importance and utility to human beings, which from the 2021 perspective does sound like kind of a bad way to do it. And of course, lots of things were changing. And so in 2015, this was a big moment, dozens of travel companies deleted elephant rides from their tours, including, I remember here when Intrepid Travel announced it, which was, big news and exciting news. But here we go into the grey areas again. Like, where to with these thousands of elephants who have been employed, essentially, to be ridden in Thailand as for the tourists? So I learnt a bit more about this from the RISE program, actually, in an interview with Daniel Turner of Anamondial. And basically his thoughts were that the sudden boycott may have done more harm than good. He said there are about 4,500 registered elephants in Thailand now, and many of them are used in tourist activities such as walking, painting and bathing. And, they are ex-ridden elephants. They used to be involved in riding, and of course most There's, not many tour companies offer those rides anymore, which is, good. But so apparently these other activities can sometimes be worse in some ways. They can be more stressful for the elephants, higher risk to people, according to research. So basically, we still have a problem. And that's the crux of this episode, I suppose. What are some of the potential sustainable and equitable solutions to the problem? We have all these elephants. Elephants typically live 50 to 60 years, so this problem is not going to go away just quickly. We have to find something that is fair all round, basically. So some of the research suggests that things are improving. So there was some research from Konto Georgopoulos again, and he said, considering the many hurdles associated with reintroducing elephants into the wild, so that's difficult, the lack of remaining suitable elephant habitat, unfortunately, not much land area left that's suitable, and the enormous expense involved with adequately caring for elephants, we know, it appears that in the short term at least, the welfare of domesticated elephants in Thailand is best served by a combination of continued tourism demand and sustained pressure on camp owners and managers to move camps in a slightly more eco-centric direction. So, I mean, this seems like what's basically happening now is that there are a lot of kind of sanctuary setups. Some of the sanctuaries are much better than others. Some of them are sanctuary in name only to get the tourist dollars. And if we continue especially as travellers, to demand better, then that will change over time. There was also an interesting study from Flower et al. This year published, in fact, 2021, and that suggested that tourist preferences are really increasingly moving towards protectionistic and ethical choices when connected with elephants, so that we tourists are wanting higher welfare standards. And if we don't see that, we're leaving negative reviews, especially if they've witnessed bad treatment. So that definitely will help. The other really important part to this solution equation is working with the local people and the people who are affected. So obviously one of the issues is that those who are owners of elephants or working as mahouts with the elephants or both need to still have a livelihood. So how can we set that up, or how can they set that up? And what other ways can we ensure that there is, that there are standards? So, for example, Bun City et al. Did a review of the elephant sanctuaries and camps. It was published last year in 2020. And one of the things that they thought was needed was a science-based set of standards or guidelines, as well as enforceable regulations for tourist elephants in Thailand, and that the future efforts they suggested should focus on working together with camps, tourist agencies and governmental agencies to be able to find a way to promote healthy and sustainable populations of captive elephants in Thailand and also in nearby countries. So it's not easy, but that's some of the ways that hopefully things can be improved upon. And we as travellers can play a really big role in that, because if we don't want to see unethical treatment, and if we are prepared to vote with our tourist dollars to experience, the highest quality of ethical care of the elephants, then that can make a huge difference. So there we go. To sum up, as I said, it's a shades of elephant grey problem. There's no black and white solution, but there's, things to keep working on. There's definitely hope. And most importantly, I guess my message is, and this is certainly what I try to practice, if you're going anywhere near elephants, or to be honest, any kind of wildlife, have a good think, do some research, figure out the best way to experience seeing them while not harming them, and hopefully actually also doing some good. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed episode 252 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast, something a bit different. There's heaps and heaps more info in the show notes for this episode. There's links to the Rise Travel Institute at risetravelinstitute.org, to World Animal Protection at worldanimalprotection.org.au, to the Facebook and LinkedIn groups, of course, as well, and a bunch of other references that I have referred to during this episode, along with a couple of videos and pictures as well. So lots and lots of stuff to have a look at in the show notes. So for this episode, you can find those show notes at notaballerina.com/252. So I would love to hear what you think. It's an unusual episode, but hopefully I've managed to do my homework well. Let me know if you think I should pass this certificate. Please say yes. All right. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.